In this chapter, you were introduced to the concepts of scripting in game development. We looked at the different types of scripts that Unity supports, specifically C# versus UnityScript. You will remember that often UnityScript is referred to as JavaScript both in the documentation and in the editor. While JavaScript is its syntax, the actual language is called UnityScript. We also learned that there are many different IDEs or text editors that we can use. But if we're using Unity, we know we can use MonoDevelop because MonoDevelop comes packaged with Unity. Also, if you're on Windows, Unity also comes packaged with Visual Studio. Then, we learned how to create and apply scripts to our game objects. We looked at the default boilerplate syntax of the scripts created by Unity, specifically the start method, update method, and the class names generated by the scripts, and we learned how to manipulate them and format them to match the way they look in the Zombie Toys project. Then we examined the various built-in methods in Unity, and we saw how we can use them to save ourselves some time and effort. From there, we learned all about variables. We learned about ints, floats, booleans, vector3s, quaternions, transforms, even how to create our own data types from the scripts that we write ourselves. We learned the difference between public and private variables, and we learned how to make variables appear in the inspector, either by declaring them as public or listing them with the attribute serialized field. We then saw how we could go into the inspector within the Unity editor and make changes to those variables without having to go back into our code. We learned all about decision making in programming using conditionals and branching logic. We learned about the if statement, if-else statement, and how to do complex decisions using the AND operator and the OR operator. We took conditionals a step further by using loops, which are effectively conditionals that repeat blocks of code. Specifically, we looked at the while loop and the for loop, and we examined the type of iterative logic it takes to break a complex problem down into a simple problem that we can solve. We know Unity's built-in methods won't handle all of our needs, so we learned how to create our own methods. We looked at method parameters and their return types. From there, we saw a special type of method called a coroutine, which is effectively a method that can exit and re-enter at various points throughout its execution. Knowing about all this scripting doesn't really help us if we can't interact with the components in our game objects. So we learned all about the getComponent method, how to get local components, components on other game objects, and even components on children game objects in the hierarchy. Finally, we ended the chapter by looking at some more complex code situations inside the Zombie Toys project. It's useful to go through and identify the simple building blocks that we already know within a more complex structure. We saw how we can take very small pieces and put them together in unique ways to create very large, very complex and robust behaviors in our games. In the next chapter, we're going to examine navigation and pathfinding in a project. We're going to learn how to prepare our world for enemies and allies to move around autonomously using AI.